Hello there, I am Amy from moonmindology.com, and today I want to look at the chart of J.D Vance. So he is the new Republican VP. The chart ruler is in the 12th, which can create self-esteem issues and isolation. The 12th house is also the house of military, and I believe that he did serve in the military. There's also a deep introspection, so he can do very well with foreign affairs. Mercury is in the 1st, so he's going to be good with communication, and he's good for quick thinking, decision making, and Mercury being in Leo, he could have loud speech and overconfidence in that regard. So Mercury does get some directional strength here, so there's a good sense of humour and an intelligence. But not only that, Jupiter aspects this planet, which shines a light on it. However, Jupiter and Mercury are not friends, so there can be problems with his speech, but this can also put him in the limelight as well. So Mercury does create some anxiety, so there can be a tendency towards bragging due to low self-esteem. The ruler of the 2nd and the 11th is in the 1st, so he's really good at making money, and this can bolster his self-esteem as well, so it makes it a little less problematic for him. And this aspect is going to be great for retaining knowledge and communicating. There are groups of people and associates who will give him opportunities to push forward. Then we have the Sun in the 12th, and this is the kind of person who really does have poor self-esteem, so it's stacking up to be that there is more poor self-esteem than positive. And interestingly, this placement is somebody who wants to work in the background, but also the house of institutions such as government and military. And he's going to be somebody who is really hot on history, and he will learn the way of the old, as well as being well versed in American history with this kind of placement. And I think he'll spend a lot of time abroad talking to foreigners and, you know, dealing with speech, as he excels in this area. But there is a sign that his relationship with his father is poor. The Sun is afflicted by Saturn, and this can create problems with leaders or authority, as well as his father. Again, there are self-esteem issues, and he is really hard on himself. And I don't really think he likes being in the spotlight. It makes him uncomfortable. And that could be why he puts his foot in his mouth. But, you know, I am really quite surprised that he is in a public position. But, you know, Rahu is in the 10th, so that can say that he is very successful. And you know, the problem here is that Saturn can remove his assertiveness, so he can come as someone who is not in control, but somebody who is reacting as well. Venus is in the 12th, and this can make him really great at finding good deals, but there's a lot of trouble in relationships as well. Venus is not in the greatest position, and you know, it's a Dastana, and it's also right at the very end of the sign. Venus does do well in the 12th, but there is still an evil influence. But the 12th house is about foreigners, and I do think his wife has foreign parents. But yeah, there can also be there's problems with relationships. So whatever, these politicians, they put a lot of this nicey forward, but it's not always as pleasant as it appears. It's all a facade. The ruler of the 12th is in the 2nd, and there is something going on with these right here, but I can't find anything on the internet to support that problem. And as this is the 12th, it's an evil house, and then the ruler is in the 2nd, it can create problem with childhood, as well as affecting his communication and his mouth. And this is a really interesting thing, because you've got so many things that say he's a great communicator, he loves communicating, but he has problems with communication. So I think he has difficulty under pressure. He may have a foul mouth, he may tell lies, and you know, he may just go as far as saying the wrong things at the wrong time and being controversial. You know, things that upset people, and you know, I do see that as a potential in other places in the chart. But because his Jupiter is strong, I don't think his ethics are actually poor. He just doesn't think through what he says, and he delivers his opinions, and you know, it's like a slab, you know, or a boot crashing through the conservatory. Then his moon is in his second house, and as I always say, the moon creates a lot of turbulence, and there can be a lot of change and disruption in his early life. There can be security problems, and his mother may have been put under a lot of stress, and that moon is really quite dark as well. But it's great for charm and speech. There's a slight affliction from Rahu, which can make speech quite over the top, loud, and there is a tendency towards inflating the truth as well. And I think he knows what to say and how to say it, but it just doesn't always come out the way that you want to. Yeah, I think he probably walks away and goes, oh, did it again. But this placement is also good for making money. But there's also an instability for his wealth as well. So you've got a lot of mixed stuff going on with money. But I think one of, as I said about the 12th house, is it's so strong. One of his strong points is he can get a deal, and I think that is something that, I think the 12th house is something that is very important. A strong 12th house is important in the chart of somebody who's going to be running a country. So the ruler of the 3rd and the 10th is in the 12th. This is great with foreign relations, and I do think that, you know, with the other aspects in his chart, he's going to do well with other leaders, and, you know, people would usually see them as intimidated, but he will see them as formidable opponents. There is a respect there, and I think he will have a really great ability in this area, and he can really talk and threaten with action, but there's also a problem with commitments as well. The ruler of the 6th and 7th is in the 3rd, and interestingly, a weakness in JD's chart is in the right ear, and I don't know whether he has a weak spot or something's happened there, but there are several confirmations to this, and, you know, I also, but that ear thing keeps coming up. I don't know, there's something worth mentioning that I don't know why, but I think the school life would have been problematic for him, and there probably would have been a lot of tension with other children when he was in education. Saturn, Mars and Pluto, they're in the 3rd house. So this is competition, ambition, great for sporting, athletics, but he can be too rough and too aggressive. He's very adventurous, he's brave, but there's problems with siblings. It's an awful lot of affliction to the 3rd house. So he was probably in a lot of fights, and there was probably problems in the home growing up, and, you know, not only with his parents, but also with his siblings as well. But this makes somebody incredibly serious, highly motivated, unstoppable, great deal of, you know, personal power. There's organisation, there's a lot of travel from work. I do know he's written a book, but this placement really shows a diligent mindset that he completes what he sets out to do. There's a phenomenal resolve, and he works incredibly hard for the things that he has. He does have a powerful speaking ability, and he's very skilled, I would say, in sport, looking at this. And because Saturn and Mars is associated with Pluto, there can be that tendency to be harsh, obsessive, workaholic, and somebody who just can't stop. There's power struggles, and he'll get so focused on a goal he can't see anything in his peripherals, and there's a heavy-handed nature with a lot of masculinity. He's probably the kind of person who's always looking for a fight or a worthy opponent. And I don't know if you like Star Trek, but I'm getting Klingon energy in this house. But if you have an emergency, he is your guy. He is the person to go to. You will want him around in an emergency, because he can go, you get there, blah, 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 and everything, you know, he can get things done. And he can click into work mode and save people. I wouldn't be surprised if he saved people's lives. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. This is a very action oriented. He sees the goal and everything else falls away. And I think as a politician, we have already seen this mindset. You know, he's great in an emergency, but can miss the big picture. You know, like notoriously, he made a comment about Kamala Harris being a cat lady. If you know me, the meowing in the background, I'm a cat lady. I thought that was distasteful. And it, you know, there's a lot of people who love cats. I mean, bleeding is insulting all of the Egyptians. We worship them. But yeah, so he's alienating a lot of his own voters who, you know, in some respects struggle to conceive, because and he wants, just because he wants to take a swipe at Kamala. Stupid move. That's stupid. Can't see the wood for the trees. Foot in his mouth. But because Mars and Saturn are together, there's a lot of frustration, and there can be outbursts, and he can act out in anger and say stupid things. And there we go. He couldn't see the wood for the trees. But Saturn in this position is usually a careful speaker, but with that affliction, and we've seen it, he doesn't quite have that ability in check. I think if you put him behind the scenes dealing with a formidable opponent, he probably could be very good. I think people like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, they will probably really enjoy having a bit of a chatty ruck with this guy, because he's in for the competition, he's in for the fight, and I think, you know, I think that could be very good. So the rule of the 4th and the 9th is in the 3rd house. Family life again, turbulent, arguing, problems with fixed assets, as well as instability in the home life. You know, that would be in childhood, and it will probably take that into adulthood as well. But there's a real interest in culture and travel, and I would hazard a guess to say that because he's got such adventurous stuff going on in his chart, he probably doesn't actually spend that much time at home. He's either working, or he's traveling, or he's on some kind of crazy adventure, or competing. I'd say that he's the sort of person that is obsessed with that kind of thing. Uranus and K2 are in the 4th, and there is a real lack of feeling in the family, a lack of, you know, a lack of connection, and there's also a relation to siblings as well. I get the feeling of there's some kind of addiction somewhere that may have been in his early life. His mother would have been unpredictable, because we have K2 here in the 4th house, and I would wonder whether she was addicted to pharmaceutical drugs. I wouldn't say street drugs. There's like a, yeah, K2, it's pharmaceuticals. But I did a little bit of research, and she was a nurse, so she probably would have access to things like that. And I think a theme of this guy's life is, especially as the 4th house tells you about endings, it can be really sudden, and there's like a sudden cutting and loss. And, you know, the 4th house is his home. He will always struggle with that. 3rd house gets better with time, but the 4th house is happiness, and I think he's gone through a lot of psychological distress in whatever he experienced. K2 aspects the sun, so this is really bad for the relationship with his father, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of separation for him, or he doesn't speak to him, and this can have like a real impact on his self-esteem. And that bravado that he puts on in his 3rd house of talking, I do think that's a cover-up for a low self-esteem, and he has a lot of insecurities on the inside. He's got Mars and Pluto together, and, you know, with those signs of self-esteem, it's more to put on that kind of myopic focus, and there could be problems there with sort of like being too controlling and being too dominant. Rahu's in the 10th, so this gives him the ability to excel in his career, which he has done, and he is great at influencing others, so he'll never feel powerful enough. There's always something he's chasing. And Rahu matures at age 42, so after that age he could become president. Also in 2027 he goes into the dasha of Saturn and Mercury is the activation for his D10. So he's going to be incredibly powerful from 2043, as that's when he goes into his Mercury Dasha. Again, there's more pointers to say that his father was addicted in some way. Rahu aspects his moon, so it creates some obsessive behavioural patterns as well. And it's not great for his mother and women in general. And I suspect that there was some kind of addiction issues with his mother. And so the 10th ruler goes to the 12th house, and this gives him a lot of power in institutions and governments. His success can come from reorganisations. Again, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has this, and he became the leader of the Labour Party after Jeremy Corbyn was set up and pushed out. So this was all actually over his Brexit views. So they made Corbyn look bad, kick him to the curb, and then installed someone who was more loyal to the groups and affiliates. But that's what I've read anyway. But why do I mention British politics? Well, it's the same thing that you've got going on here. So the 10th ruler is in conjunction with the sun, which is the Karaka for leadership. So he's due potentially to come into great power at the age of 42, and he has that upcoming Dasha where his D10 is activated. And I don't know, will Trump complete his full term? Will he be betrayed? Will something happen? I don't know. I've got a little bit of a hunch that something may go on, but I'm not psychic. I just use the Vedic astrology. But yeah, I think he has his eyes on the top. I think he has a long way to go, and he's just power hungry. Is it good or is it bad? That's down to the voter. Jupiter is in the 5th house with Neptune, and this is really good for his sense of humour and his ability to gamble and take risks. So he's a good advisor. There's good deep faith, and it's faith that keeps him going, I think. I would say that his faith is something that keeps him morally sound. But Neptune can create a bit of confusion, and there is affliction from Saturn, so there can be a lot of exaggeration as well. He's idealistic, and Saturn can bring some of that idealism to the ground and make it even more realistic. So you've got that balance there. He is adventurous, but he does have a problem with the overinflation of his ideas. He's lucky. I think he does have good morals deep down, and he can judge a situation well, but he has to try and keep control instead of getting emotional about things. And there is a love for children, but with Neptune here, there's something going on. His children can be secretive, or there could be problems with them. And Jupiter is quite exaggerated in this house as well, so there's potentially a problem there. The 5th and the 8th ruler is in the 5th, so he is actually creative, and 5th house is politics. So there's a great passion and ability in this area, and it's another sign that there's problems with children. But 8th is a lot to do with intelligence. 5th has intelligence as well, so he is really smart. One thing I want to really add is Mars is directly opposed to his midheaven. So this is a quick reacting person who can fly by the seat of his pants and sometimes get in trouble. So he has to think about what he says before he says it. And there is a bit of a deep anger here and problems with authority. So this is all linked back to his problems with his father, and this can create issues with people who are above him. So he may find that as much as it may be going smooth right now, there can be times where he butts heads with Donald Trump, as his authority. And moving on to the transit, so he's going to have some great transits this year. Jupiter is going to be aspecting his moon on the 7th of November, which I do believe is voting day. So this is going to be going backwards and forwards into 2025. And don't forget, Jupiter is currently in his 10th house, and his natal Jupiter is very strong and it's full of a positive association. In July 2025, Jupiter is going to be aspecting his natal Jupiter, so there could be a lot of work with groups and alliances. Then in the same month of July, there's an aspect to his exalted Saturn, which I think is really going to be very good for his professional position, as well as his daily work and his marriage as well. So I think he's on the up this year. And, you know, I think he is very cutthroat. But he has good intentions, he's great in emergency, he's very reactive, he can make major mistakes by overcompensating. But, you know, I think he could have a positive effect. I watched a bit of his speech and he said, I went to Iraq for this country, but then I saw he actually didn't see any action, but he missed that part out. So, you know, there can be that sense of overestimation and kind of like missing out the facts to make you think something. But, you know, I think that having that ability to tell the truth but leave bits out to make it seem something that it isn't is, in some situations, that can be good, especially when you're trying to deal with you know, leaders of other countries who like that kind of game. You know, Rahu in Taurus is going to be really good for small businesses and agriculture. So the Sun and Venus is in the 4th as well. So I think a leader influenced by his chart, a country influenced by his chart, there's going to be more power to the states and cities instead of central government, and there could be revitalisation to the family unit, local areas, which actually so far I think matches up with a lot of what the Republicans are about, or what this administration is about. Mercury is in Leo, and Leo is about your rich people, your businessmen, and those that are at the top of the food chain. So this is going to bring more young people in, and it's also going to be good for happiness and general entertainment. Moon in Virgo, it's going to bring a lot of energy to the service industry. And then we've got Libra. So he was born in 1984, and here you have Pluto in the side of your social freedoms and your contracts. So, you know, he may want to tell you how to live your life. You know, Trump doesn't have this. Trump doesn't care about impacting your social freedoms. He's more interested in business and small government. But this guy wants to tell you what to do. With Saturn and Mars here as well, he could bring in some quite harsh laws. And he could cause problems, and you know, that's worth bearing in mind if he does want to be a president one day. I could be wrong, but you know, he has a very strong chart that's going to be difficult to beat. But overall, there can be scientific inventions and advances in pharmaceuticals with this chart influencing America. But I do think banking may struggle a bit. Religion's a real big thing, and faith in this chart, and there's a lot of power from natural resources, and I think that he could push a lot of laws about oil as well. But we'll see what happens. That's my little kind of look at Vance, J.D. I don't know, J.D Vance, there you go. Yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed my reading today. It's been very interesting looking at this person. He's got a lot of power behind him. But I will see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.